Welcome to Unlocking Your Truth, another podcast by Dr. Lesley Phillips.
This is the Dr. Lesley Show, Unlocking Your Truth with Corry Kouwenberg, and my guest today, Joe Dardano. He's a good friend of mine. The Unlocking Your Truth is usually with Dr. Lesley, and she likes to talk about all kinds of great stuff on here, metaphysics, spirituality, goals to uplift, inspire, expand your concept of reality. And she usually does a weekly exploration of intuitive or mystical or paranormal things, supernatural. Tonight we're going to talk about something in that realm, but just a little bit different. With Joe here, I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about himself in a minute, but we're going to talk about men. Not necessarily men per se, but ladies, don't leave yet. We're going to talk about the inner pinnings of men, what they feel, how they feel, why they do what they do, and why they're totally misinterpreted sometimes, especially by you ladies. And just the same, I mean, we misinterpret the ladies quite a bit, so we're even on that score. Tonight we're going to try to learn a little bit about each other, and male and female. So it's a little bit on the metaphysical, a little on the spiritual. So now I've got Joe in the studio with me, and Joe is a successful teacher. He's a teacher here in BC. He's also a real estate investor. He's a public speaker. He's a mentor and men's success coach and group facilitator. Now, he says after he grew up on the east side of Vancouver, he's a son of immigrant parents, same as myself actually, and he attended UBC, then moved on to a master's degree at Queen's University. He then had a teacher certificate at SFU. He's a little more educated than I am, I can tell you that. Now he teaches at the Vancouver College. It's an all-boys school. He loves to invest in real estate and coaches men who are interested in personal success. And if I'm not mistaken, Joe, when you talk about welcome, by the way.
Thank you, Corry.
And my understanding is when you talk about personal success, you're not just talking about money, right?
No, Corry. I think the greatest measurement of personal success is when a man or a woman or an individual sits back and says, okay, I want to improve, and that criteria they use to improve is themselves in the past. So the measuring stick is yourself, really. Don't compare yourself to other people, but compare yourself to where you were before.
So Joe, tell me a little bit. So you're looking at, my understanding is you're looking at creating a very specialized men's group.
Yes.
And how did you come about this? What is it about, and how did you come about putting this together?
Corry, my experience has been, you mentioned I was very educated. I've been to, actually, there's another school, Gonzaga, I went to, and I started a doctorate there about 7 or 8 years ago, and I didn't finish it. But, the real education I've received is being on the street, listening, speaking with, hearing, teaching, helping the poorest of the poor. Men's issues came to light for me about 20-odd years ago after getting married in 96. I spent about a year and a half at a halfway house. These were men who were let out of prison early, perhaps are on parole or early release of some sort through the persuasion of a charismatic ex-con by the name of Alan Amerlin. And he brought him into his home. And he had, people like myself come in and lead Bible studies and mentor some of these men, help them transition to the real world. And after, these sessions, these guys, some of us leaders went out to Tim Hortons. And us men just got together and we talked amongst themselves. And I realized how much men hungered to be with men. Just that time aside to talk about real issues, to be ourselves, to just share our own thoughts and feelings about things that go on in our lives. And in fact, it came to the point where, I was more excited about the meeting with the other guys than just, with the ex-cons. And that evolved from there. I went on and I spent a couple of years doing some, visiting men in prison out in the Fraser Valley and also at youth prison in Burnaby. Did a couple of years, just visiting inmates who were in there who were struggling, didn't have anybody to talk to. And from there, moving on to the downtown east side where I worked for 9 years, teaching, those who were down and out. And some of the same patterns I've started hearing over and over, patterns of failure. When you asked me about success, yes, success is, available to everybody, but I wanted to study how people failed and just, do the opposite. So over and over, I hear stories from people who are, sleeping on park benches, sleeping in rooming houses, SROs, sleeping on the street. There's many that slept on my doorway in front of my office, on Cordova Street. And they'd come in and, I'd educate them. And they'd come to my class and I'd listen to their stories. And over time, that's where my real education happens, just listening to people who are hurting over the years. And from that, I've been able to extrapolate, some principles that I believe work if men are willing to change or want to improve their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that, when you look at, for instance, Dr. Gray, and Men Are for Mars, Women Are for Venus, and books along those lines and teachings along those lines. I've been involved with a couple of men's groups myself, and I've learned a lot from the interaction with other men. And one thing I learned, and it's what you just brought up. We're not all alone. I'll share a little story with you and the listeners, if you don't mind. I remember being in a men's retreat once. It was about 150 men there, and the speaker, who is a very well-known speaker here in Canada, was up talking, and very well-to-do. He's a very rich man, and he bared his soul to us, and he said, he said, every morning I wake up. Almost every morning I wake up, for a long time, he says, I would think, I'm faking it. Someone's going to catch me. Someone's going to figure it out. And my heart went out to him because that's how I felt. And he said, gentlemen, he says, how many of you feel that way? So I put my hand up, and then he said, look around the room. Every man in that room had his hand up. It was incredible. We're all, guys, we feel that way. And ladies, that's how your man feels. He occasionally feels like he's faking it. And so try to understand that. It's not a good feeling to have. So, Joe, tell me a little bit about what are some of the pertinent issues facing men today, and what are some of the feelings that they have? What are some of the things that I understand you've got 5 habits of men? Have you?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
That you've developed.
I have. I think there's 5 things that I think I believe men, if they put into action, can really lead them to a road of success. And now you ask the question, what are men feeling? I think number one thing is their masculinity. Right now in 2015, it's a question mark. If a man says, they don't know they don't know what their masculinity is about. There's a lot of confusion, uncertainty, insecurity. Maybe they're not providing enough. There's a bunch of things thrown in there. I think the masculinity is the number one issue. Is they don't know what it is to be a man today. There's a lot of confused images out there.
Yeah, most men think, being a man is, being like the Rock, muscles,
right.
And especially when they're young and
right.
When they're young men, and that's what I find. It's. But as you get older, like you and I have been around the block once, maybe even twice, and I know for myself that masculinity is not about your outward appearance. It's within you.
It's within you. You mentioned that the hard rock bodybuilder. Remember the Marlboro Man on those commercials for those cigarette commercials. There's one image right there that is difficult, I think, to identify with today because today's male is primarily urban. Living probably in a very small space in Vancouver, for example. If you're living 500 square feet, that's small space, and you probably don't have a car, and you're working in an office space, and there's not a lot of, there's a lot of opportunities to kind of be that wild man and go out and stick that shovel in the ground and start getting in touch with some primal instinctual energies that are endemic to all males. We all have instincts. Males have instincts, survival instincts, instincts to provide. And that's, I think, another big one. Now, if you look at Canada's, the typical purchasing power of a Canadian the last 20 years has gone down quite a bit. I was just doing an experiment with my economics students a few weeks ago. $50,000 20 years ago was really worth $57,000, and now it's worth $40,000. You don't think a man feels that?
Oh, definitely. I think what you're talking about, and I've heard this term used many times, and I use it myself when I'm working with people and doing healings and things like this. It's a purpose, a sense of purpose. If a man has no purpose, then his masculinity suffers, and when his masculinity suffers, and masculinity is not machoism again, men out there. It's not about being macho, and ladies, it's not about the macho-ness. It's about a certain emotion, a certain physicality, or an intimate that's more spiritual than it is physical, and I think that's quite pertinent to what we're talking about today. Masculinity is not a physical thing; it is actually a spiritual thing.
And can I read something from? I'm going to read something from the Atlantic. This is
Sure,
America in
go
2010 by Hannah Rosen. This is an article, and the article is entitled "The End of Men." Now,
Wow.
and this process we're talking about tonight was really accelerated through the recession recently. And let me read this excerpt here. Once you open your eyes to the possibility and evidence is all around you, it can be found most immediately in the wreckage of the Great Recession of 2008, in which 3/4 of the 8 million jobs lost in U.S. alone were lost by men. The worst hit industries were overwhelmingly male and deeply identified with macho: construction, manufacturing, high finance. Some of these jobs will come back, but the overall pattern of this dislocation is neither temporary nor random. The recession merely revealed and accelerated a profound economic shift that has been going on for the last 30 years, and in some respects even longer. Earlier in 2010, for the first time in U.S. history, the balance of the workforce tipped towards women, who now hold the majority of the nation's jobs. The working class, which has long defined the notions of masculinity, is slowly turning into a matriarchy, which men increasingly are increasingly absent from home, and women making all the decisions. Women dominate today's colleges and professional schools. For every 2 men who receive a BA this year, 3 women will do the same. Of the 15 job categories projected to grow the most in the next decade, all but 2 are occupied primarily by women. So there you go, from the end of men in the Journal of the Atlantic. Men have had experienced some tremendous, profound economic shifts the last 6, 7, 8 years, and have a hard time recovering from that.
And ladies, don't misunderstand us. We're not saying that you've got all the great jobs and all that. What we're saying is that there's been a shift, and there more shifts still have to happen. I mean, there's still not 100% equality between what men are being paid and what women are being paid for the same job, and we understand that. And that's not right either. But we're not here talking about money as much as we are talking about how it feels. And again, how does it affect the spirit? How does it affect the id of the male, and actually the id of the female as well? And as an example, let me give you a very quick example that if you don't mind, Joe. When you look at a man and he's called to war, and his wife, she looks at that. She's got 2 little kids, and she doesn't want him to go. She never wanted to. Please don't go. And the day he's leaving for the war, no, sweetheart, I don't want you to go. Please stay. Well, ladies, how would you feel if he actually did stay and said, you know what, I want to shirk my duties, and I'm not gonna go to war? It's not. You would look down. There would be, oh my gosh, he's not a man of his word. He doesn't have character. He's a coward. All of a sudden, you would shift. And this is what we're talking about when you're talking about men's emotion and the masculine decline, the decline of masculinity.
Yeah, indeed, and so when women have hardship, they're very much, they have great coping skills. They have more words than men. I think a female per day loves to talk about 50,000 words a day, and a guy maybe 20 or 30. So females have great coping skills with it. So when there's hardships to the female, they'll go and have a coffee with a friend. You see them in a coffee shop. I saw actually 5 elderly ladies today in South Surrey, White Rock, when I brought my daughter home from her orthodontist appointment. There's about 7 or 8 elderly ladies chatting, at a coffee shop. Men don't seem to go that direction. They tend to keep it in. And so when it's kept in, it's tend to be twisted and rechanneled to things like substance abuse, depression, anger. You hear these stories of domestic violence that getting more frequent, pornography. The list goes on and on and on, how man goes inward, and these aren't healthy mechanisms. And the family unit suffers. There's separations, and of course, as a real estate investor myself, I've made a lot of money over separations. People come rent my places over years. That's just true. I've had a lot of divorced and separated people. So that being said, I've been involved in men groups for 15, 20 years, and I believe men, number one issue to help in those. You talked about the habits earlier. The one habit men need to get into if they want to be on that road to success and feeling better and feeling that they're on an upward slope is they need to meet. They need to meet. Men need to meet on a regular basis. And men have been doing it in different ways. They play golf. They go fishing together. They play hockey in men's hockey leagues, beer leagues. But they need to meet. They need to meet and need to meet regularly. And when they meet, they move forward. Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, called it a mastermind group. I call it a master being group. It's not really mastermind as much. It's a master being, because men seem to learn by osmosis, Corey. It's not as much an intellectual thing. I think Robert Bly, the great poet, who did a lot of work on men's issues over the years, talked about this. Men need to learn. They tend to learn better by just being in each other's presence. Just being hanging out together, And I teach at a boys' school, and the boys learn from that. They'll tell me something. I learned this 2 years ago when you did this and that. It wasn't something I've said, just the way I've done something,
Yeah, I agree with you 100% there. I love to do dishes. I will not let my wife. I've never let anybody that I've always done the dishes. And I looked at that one day, and why did I do that? Why do I love doing dishes? And I realized I like to say, I like to keep my hands warm and clean, but that's not it. It's my dad did dishes. That was he did the dishes at home. And so I look at that, and I look at doing the dishes and helping out my spouse as being a very masculine thing to do. Whereas a lot of women would look at the opposite. My father helped my mother with the housework, and that came down to me. It's not hereditary, but I learned from my father. It's the modeling. It's all about modeling, and I agree with you 100%. Well, we're going to take a short break here, and again, this is Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Lesley, who is not here. She'll be back next week. My name is Corry Kouwenberg. I'm the show producer and the host for 2 weeks, and I'm really enjoying this. So we're going to take a couple of minutes break, and we will be right back afterwards. Hello, we're back with Unlocking Your Truth. Here tonight with Joe Dardano. And Joe is a coach and a coach for men, a men's group coach. And we're talking about masculinity. And again, ladies, it's not to say that I think it's very important as it's important for men to understand women and the underpinnings of women. It's also important for the women to understand the men, and it's a difficult thing to do. Women are very difficult to understand, and men are difficult to understand because we have our own natures, and that's what we're talking about tonight. It's not talking about the masculine man, and the feminine woman. We're talking about the masculine, the spirit, the nature of man and the nature of women. And we just start talking about And Joe has 5 habits that he's talking about with regards to men. And I'll pass it over to Joe. Can you tell us about those 5 habits, Joe?
Yes, Corey. I talked about the first one, which I believe is the crux, the cornerstone of the 5 habits. That is, men need to meet. Successful men need to network and meet on a regular basis. And I call it point 59. What is point 59? If you look at all the hours of the week, Corey, and you meet with other men for 1 hour of all the hours that are available for the whole week, that's only 0.59% of your time. It's not much.
Not at all.
No, it isn't. But it's leverage. And being in real estate, I love leverage, right? You put a little in, you get the most out. You put a little bit of your money in, use more of the bank's or private money, and you profit that way. And I think if you're going to profit in your life, you want to use leverage. And an hour a week is only just think about it for a minute, only 0.59% of your time in taking the time to meet with other men, to network, and to learn, how to feel. Here's habit number 2. Men have aggression. They do have aggression. They're born with instincts. And I think successful males need to channel that aggression, learn how to channel it successfully. And that's the thing. Some people go running. I run. Some people work out with weights. Some people play sports. It has to be some sort of physical outlet, because if you learn to channel it and be a master of your passions, I think that's habit number 2, is to learn to have an inner discipline in your daily life, whether it's a regular workout or weights, whatever it is, to learn to channel. The third one is a condition that affects men regularly, but they don't even know it most of the time. That is doubt. Doubt often comes in. Doubt often comes into men's thoughts all the time. Can I really do this? And also men when they jibe with each other, when they spar, they will always put doubt in their friends' minds. You can really do that. You're sure you can do that? Are you really capable of doing this? And so I think a successful male, number 1, meets with other men. And of course, we mentioned Napoleon Hill in the mastermind group. I call it Master Being group. So habit number 1, meet regularly, 1 hour a week, 0.59% of your time. Number 2, channel aggression. It's going to be there. We need to channel it, master those passions. Number 3, crush doubt and take action. Doubt's going to come in every day, and so we need to kind of step on it and move ahead. Point number 4, I think successful men are very focused on their goals, and as you mentioned earlier in today's show, Corey, men get in touch with their main purpose. I think this is something that David Data talked about in the famous book, The Way of the Superior Male, or The Way of the Superior Man. He talked about men need to get in touch with their inner purpose. What is really your mission here on this earth while you're alive? What's your purpose? What were you destined to do? What's your quest? Get on your horse, get your lance, get your sword and shield, and go on that journey. And what does that journey entail? What dragons are you going to slay? What trolls are you going to knock down? What mountains are you going to climb? And for some people, those mountains could be a big business deal. For some, it could be being a great decathlon runner. For some, it could be whatever, an achievement of some sort. It could be getting a PhD. I remember one time Robert Bly, again, talked about, to get a graduate degree, you have to be a warrior. I remember reading about that years ago. So that's the 4th. And the 5th one is, successful men, I believe, and this is reflecting back what Napoleon Hill talked about. Napoleon Hill talked about where there's a successful male, there's a successful female behind him. I believe a successful male drinks from his own well. Okay? And I'll tell you a story. I met with a very successful male yesterday for coffee. And well-off male, was a teacher, a superintendent, invested in real estate and other businesses, and his brother accused him of being lucky, in life. But he just gave him quietly said to him, look, I've been drinking from the same well for 50 years. I've been married 50 years. And his brother, of course, the first divorce led to a split in the pie, and the second divorce, another split. And by the time now he's on his 3rd or 4th, he's got 1/8 when he started out with. And so I think energies are energy is very strong. The laser beam that penetrates the nuclear atom is a strong force. And that one chapter in Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, talks about sex transmutation. It's in the 11th chapter. It's a very it's a kind of an ambiguous chapter. People have kind of stumbled on it. They don't know how to explain it. They don't understand it. Not many people have written about it, actually, to be honest. But I believe there's power in that chapter, and there's power in that force that I think most men today haven't realized it. And it's the crux of these 5 habits. It serves as one of the cornerstones, and that is focusing your sexual energies on one partner. And I believe that leads to success, economic, relational, in many ways. So that's the 5 habits right there.
Very interesting. It brings to mind some things I picked up, from mentors along the way as well. And I had one mentor who likened women to water, a free-flowing river, free and easy flowing, and the men as banks on either side of them, holding them in and sort of not guiding them or telling where they should go, but being a guiding force in that relationship. And a lot of women looked at me and would go, that's a terrible way to look at it. Yeah, but anytime that water wants to overflow the bank and erode those banks, you can't stand in their way. Women are strong as well. I mean, women are stronger than men, like you said, in many, many different ways. And definitely, I think having a solid partner in a wonderful, strong woman is the way to go. I mean, I know my partner; she's wonderful. She helps guide me, and when I've got issues, she understands. She has a problem with understanding the feeling I'm going through, but she understands that I'm going through feelings, and that she can't understand it. And she gives me my space as well. And the one thing I've learned as well is that they're men and women are so very different. Women in most situations fear abandonment. They fear abandonment. They fear being left by their husbands, by their parents, by their father, by their friends. Whereas men fear being trapped. They don't like to be trapped. And when you trap a man, that instinct that you talked about earlier comes out, and they attack. And that's usually what happens. That's usually when a man gets into a fight or an argument, is when he's feeling trapped and he feels no way out. What do you think about that?
Well, I think what you're saying is that women are very literate in their feelings, in their feeling life. They can, if they're having an issue, they can go have a conversation. Men don't even know what they feel half the time, or most of the time. True. Oftentimes they'll go for a run or a physical workout, or they'll go chop some wood, because that's what they feel their body's telling them to do. Often I feel that way. It's like, I don't know what I'm feeling this morning. I wake up, but I think I feel I need to go for a run or lift some weights or something like that. And so, or go hunting or chop wood, whatever, something physical, But when you talked earlier, Corry, about men being the banks and the women the water, women feel a certain way when they notice that their man something's not quite right with their man.
Oh, definitely.
And I want to read something to you, because I think there's a lot of women out there that identify with this feeling, okay? Because they live with their men, and when they sense there's something wrong, it can be very, very impactful. Listen to this. Weakness and men don't mix. With protector-provider ingrained in their DNA, men believe it's their primal job to be strong. If outside influences upset a man's strength or ability to provide and protect, the man may experience angst, stress, and a desperate desire to regain control. However, since men are unlikely to share their feelings, this is what I'm talking about earlier here, the silent anxiety affects their relationships in untold ways. The man wants to solve, push through, or dispel his fears, but he doesn't want to admit them to others. Meanwhile, his significant other can sense his worry, but may not be able to put her proverbial finger on the issue, which results in a disconnected and lack of understanding. it results in a disconnection and lack of understanding. She might think he is being distant, cheating, or uninterested. As problem solvers, men look for the fastest, most effective ways to work through issues. And many think the best way is to do that alone. That's why, of course, I recommend one of my habits, point 59, meet. Men need to meet, you see. But therein lies the main challenge for relationship dynamics. He wants to work through it alone and thus fails to communicate it, and his significant other knows something's wrong but doesn't know what it is and may assume it has something to do with her even if it doesn't. So this is what many women are feeling. There's a silent elephant in the room. And it's hard to put a finger on what's going on. And often over the years I've met many wives who have said, take this guy and just mentor and coach him, have him come to the group or whatever. Because I've had several groups I've been involved with over the years. I remember one fellow I met many years ago. Was with a friend of mine. We're in a group, and we agreed to meet this fellow who was in distress. And his wife marched in, all angry. Was about to kill him actually, but he was caught in some affairs, and so he was thrown to us, and he never came to our group, but she expected to fix him. But this is years and years and years of frustration, anger, unspoken anxiety. And it's almost like it's a giant elephant in the room, Corry, that you can feel it, but you can't really put your finger on it.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting, again, in Dr. Gray's book, Men Are for Mars, Women Are for Venus, it's interesting how men and women differ. I mean, when a woman has an issue, the man, all he wants to do is fix it for her. So it's very, very difficult for him to sit back and watch this happen. And I go through that with my wife a lot, but I've learned how to step back. And then when she asks me for advice, then I would give it to her. And in my expertise, not necessarily in the relationship, but in what I do have done in my career. And so, and with men, it's very similar with men, but the thing with men is they get to a place, they chew themselves up inside, and they get into a place where if the woman does come to help, she'll meet aggression. And I know my feelings quite well, and I explain to my wife, when I'm not feeling well, when you see me having an issue, let me alone. Let me be. Let me go to my cave, as Dr. Gray would say. Let me go in there. When I come out, we'll talk about it. And I'm not afraid about talking about my feelings. It's just we need that space. And the women need an ear. And it's so difficult for them to understand that. I saw a great video on TED Talks a little while back, and I can't remember the gentleman's name. But it's I'll have to bring it and give it to Lesley, and she can tell her readers, listeners. It was very much along these lines. So, you were mentioning,
Corry, just to jump in 1 second,
Sure.
I wanted to kind of add on to the point of men wanting to do it alone. Just an interesting story I learned from a very successful CEO that I heard. I arranged for his talk to come in. He came and gave a talk to my students last year. He sold a biomedical company for $2.1 billion to a British company 7 or 8 years ago, and he was a doctor at UBC many years ago, GP, and was working, was very successful. And then there was just something missing in his life, and he wanted to step out and create vaccines naturally. Okay. And so he created this very successful company, and in 17 years built it up to the point where he sold for $2.1 billion. And he's now doing other things. He's got a vineyard now, and he's doing some other entrepreneurial things. But one thing in that talk that really ran loud for me in hearing that talk, he spoke for about 50 minutes. He said, I could not do this business alone, you see. He was the general, he was the chief, he was the doctor, he had a lawyer on his team, and he had an accountant on his team. And the three of them built this company, ID Biomedical. successfully over 17 years. They ran all over the country building, projects all over Canada. And that was really something, and that goes against the male instinct. See, the male instinct tends to want to do it alone. I got a problem. I've got an issue. I feel frustrated. I feel angry. I feel alone, sad, whatever. A male generally wants to just keep it to himself and keep it alone, just to safeguard that image and protect the facade of being the provider and then the protector and the breadwinner and who cannot be vulnerable, you see, who cannot be vulnerable. And so this talk that really affected my life shows the power of cooperation, the power of teamwork, the power of letting people into your life and forming a team and not really doing it alone, Corry.
Oh, definitely. It's. I know I feel that way. Well, even here at the radio station, it's. I mean, it's perfectly evident. Whether Lesley and I come in, we do the show. But if it weren't for the team behind us, the techs, the manager, the station manager, and the people who work on the equipment, I mean, the show would never get out in the air. It's no question, and we cannot do it alone. Regardless of what you're doing, whether it's a relationship, whether you're working around the house, it's so difficult. We'd like to, as men, to be able to do it and do it alone and have all the answers. But you know what? I agree. Well, we're going to take another short break now, and how men feel inside. Welcome to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Lesley Phillips, who is not here at the present time. We're here with Joe Dardano talking about men, their feelings, and their spirituality, and how it relates to women and the world. Now, we've talked about some of the issues that men have. Now we're going to talk about how can we fix some of this? What can we do? How can we make changes as men? How can we relate to the outer world outside of ourselves? What do we need to do within ourselves? What do we need to do to actually make a difference in our own being so that we'll get along better with our spouses, our girlfriends, our friends, our co-workers, the world in itself, but mainly ourselves, so that when we look in the mirror, we're happy to see what we see, as opposed to looking at someone and, as I said, thinking that we're looking at ourselves and thinking that we're fakes, that they're going to be caught, we're going to be found out. So, Joe, you're talking about a men's group,
right?
Tell me a little bit more about that men's group.
Well, there's twofold purpose in it. Number one, a place to meet, to feel, to get real, and number two, to encourage each other. Iron sharpening iron, a way to spur each other on to meet our goals. And that's essentially it. We talked about earlier about men having a hard time doing it alone, right? Doing it alone. Almost like men are programmed that way almost. But we have to learn to reach out to others. So I think, making it better, helping men achieve more, feel better about themselves, look, as you say, looking in the mirror and feeling good about what they see. I think the first step is getting out and connecting with other men. That's the number one thing, is finding a place where there's like-minded folks. And my groups over the years have always been successful because men have felt safe and they've allowed themselves to experience themselves and experience their feelings, and they make time for that hour. And they look forward to it because it's a time where they can be real. Men have a lot of pressure: breadwinner, protector, provider, hunter. Go get those deals done. Go bring that bacon home, right? And if they have a family at home, there's more demands made on when they get home. They love to have a space. They need to have a space where they can just be themselves, just let their guard down, and just be who they are. That's why I think, some men who develop habits where they can do like fishing and golfing, they don't want to give that up. They find a club or a hobby. They will keep those things. They will look forward to doing those things with their friends. But some men don't fish, and some men don't golf, and some men don't hunt, and they don't ski. So if they're not doing something to get out of themselves, they're just going to be in a bit of a vacuum, and that vacuum can get, in many cases, get pretty ugly. I was just looking up today. I want to bring that article. February 25th, Vancouver Province. I saw the headline when I was, and I don't read the province, but I was at work. I saw, a copy there, voyeurism on the rise. And in reading the article, I saw, about 8 or 9 men being to be charged with voyeurism because of the progress of technology is such that people can hide cameras in all weird places. And I sit back and I ask myself, where does a man find time to be a voyeur? Waste so much time like that. And so perversions like this that are that have really come to harm other people, the health of women, the health of men even, is such that these are people that are very much isolated. They live in their own little dream world, and so I think, this part of the solution is get out, meet with other men, meet regularly, and make it a group, make it a club, make it a thing where it's a priority. And from there you see that people, will move forward in their lives economically, relationally, socially, and self-esteem-wise too. Because like that CEO that I told you about, he didn't sell that company for $2.1 billion by doing it alone. He did it with the help of others. So
that's great. Now, you're talking about men meeting together. And I think that's a great idea, by the way. I mean, I've done weekly get-togethers with a group of, there were 6 of us. We'd meet every week at one house or the other, and we had everything from head chefs for a huge chain of restaurants to unemployed people. And we did find solace in our group. We had a specific, for these meetings, we had a specific agenda where we would do specific things. I mean, discuss our issues and things along those lines. And we would challenge each other with regards to our personal challenges. What would your men's group look like?
Well, we'd get together. We would first we'd first talk about some of the challenges and feelings we have. First of all, feelings are important. Feelings are important to get in touch with. What are we feeling today? And if we don't know what we're feeling, maybe listen to someone else talk a little bit and see what they're saying. And usually, the first 2 shares, usually spurs on other people to share and get what they're at. Often there's someone, and I think, meeting first thing in the morning is very, very valuable because you're very, very raw first thing in the morning. I've had groups where we meet, midday or first thing in the morning, evenings, but the ones first thing in the morning are usually the best because you're raw. You just woken up, and your feelings are right to the surface, Often if you have a busy day doing a bunch of different things, your feelings will be right down to your toes. But first thing in the morning, usually the best. In fact, I used to, years ago, and I got onto that years ago when I met a group out of Seattle that had a 6 a.m. meeting. They call it the Coffee Cup Group or something, Express Coffee Group. And they met from 6 to 6:30. It was about 4 or 5 guys. And they would rave about that. It would just give them a little like injection of some sort of drug, for the day. And so I think first thing in the morning is important. Number 2, what are you feeling today? And so they go around the room, everyone's sharing a little bit, and then we go on to see what we want to accomplish for the week, and sharing our goals and being accountable to one another in sharing those goals and achieving those goals. And often what that would entail, of course, during the week is phone calls with perhaps maybe one person in that group to say, hey, you know what, I was supposed to close this one, say, real estate deal between now and next week. I've got to do these 10 things to get that deal closed. And the meeting may be, say, on a Wednesday, and maybe by the Friday, give someone a call saying, hey, look, I'm on point number 4 now. I've crossed off the 4th thing. I got to do the last 6, by next Wednesday. I'll give you a call Monday. I'll see where I'm at. It may give someone a call Monday. Say, hey, I'm on number 8 now, and that really helps because men and human beings in general are almost like like an airplane. You get a flight plan going, you're going in a certain direction, but it goes off course all the time. The wind, all these different forces are out there up in the sky that'll, and so the pilot's always bringing it back on course, bring it back to the flight plan. I think you've heard this analogy before. And that's essentially what human beings are like. We need each other to bring each other back to that course that we feel we need to be on, And I'm not talking about someone taking someone with the scruff of the neck saying, you got to go in this direction. No, we come up with the goals we want to achieve. But I think having a friend, beside us, working with us, can help us achieve that. In fact, a surgeon friend of mine mentioned, because I invited him to a group just recently, and he said, he read an article where males, and he's a very high-stress surgeon, he's got a busy life and family, wife and kids, and he's working long hours, working hard, and he says, and men who have friends, he says, and meet regularly live 5 years longer.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's an interesting stat. Just to go back to your accountability, I think is the word you're looking for. This is why the coaching programs are so popular these days. Because even in weight loss, I remember I put on some weight a few years back, and I just couldn't shake it. And I went to the gym, and I did this, and I did that. And so I finally went to one of these weight loss programs here in Vancouver. And I was assigned a coach. And what I had to do is I had to write down everything I ate during the day. And I had to bring that book to that coach once a week. Oh, no, I'm sorry, every second day we met. And we met, I think it was every 2 days, every three times a week. And you want to know, I didn't cheat because I had to show, and this is a person I'm paying to help me lose weight. And it worked. And I used to be with a company who had a large coaching program. And when you have that accountability, it's amazing what you can accomplish. As opposed to, it's even stronger than writing your goals. Because when you voice them, you've put them into the universe. You've voiced that energy. The universe is also your coach as well. The universe, when you voice that, the universe will help you complete your goals. Now, what would you say to women? What would you say to the women about this program? I'm sure most women would be supportive, but not all women will be supportive of their men going to a men's group because of fear, of some sort of a fear. I mean, fear is, of course, the false evidence appearing real. So, what would you say to a woman whose man wanted to go to the group, or what would you say to a woman whose men needed to go to the group?
Yeah, I've met more cases where I've met women who silently suffer the suffering, living with men who are silently suffering, holding in their feelings, depressed, not achieving their goals, procrastinating. Here's another, interesting inferior habit I would call. I think I've met more. I don't think I've been in a situation where I had to convince a woman that their husband needs to be there. I think I've met many more. That says my husband needs to be with you guys. Way more. I think women out there know. They sense it. They see it. They feel it. They live it. They experience it. Where a lot of their men are underachieving, underperforming, under-earning, procrastinating, lazy, perhaps misguided. Maybe putting the time and energy in things that aren't productive. They're not bringing in results in their lives. Maybe they're overweight. Maybe they're down on themselves. Maybe they don't have the highest self-esteem. Whatever. Maybe there's unrealized dreams. Henry David Thoreau, who it was, that said most men lead lives of quiet desperation. Right? Henry David Thoreau, many years ago, 100+ years ago, said most men lead lives of quiet desperation. It's not something loud and boisterous. At least someone who's loud and boisterous, who's, spazzing on the street, at least is expressing some sort of feeling. We're talking about men who are going inward, almost caving inward, if you will. An implosion, if you will. A quiet implosion. And it's hard to recognize. Like you see someone in an office space, it's hard to see that unless you're around them a long time and pick it up. But a spouse will pick it up quite quickly.
Yeah, because you're putting on that face, right? Yeah. So Joe, if this sounds all very interesting. How would I get involved with one of these groups?
Well, visit my landing page, joedardano.com, www.joedardano.com. www.joedardano.com/mensgroup.html. That's www.joedardano.com/mensgroup.html.
That's Dardano, DARDANO.
.com/mensgroup.html. Leave your email and name, and we'll send you some more information soon.
Okay, that's great. Any parting words for us? Any short parting words that you have that would help us men and women understand each other?
Seize the day. Live today. Live fully, because time passes. As you get older, I'm 50. As you get older, you got less and less of it. So seize the day, seize the moment.
Well, Joe, thank you very much. That was great. I really appreciate your time. It was a wonderful talk, and hopefully we can have you on again. And next week, get ready for Dr. Lesley. She'll be back. I don't know if she gave you any homework while she was away, but she gave me lots. So she'll be back again next week. And it has been a pleasure to be with you for these 2 weeks. I look forward to maybe coming back one day, if Lesley will let me.
Thank you for joining us. You've been listening to another Unlocking Your Truth podcast by Dr. Lesley Phillips. For more information, go to our website at drlesleyphillips.com. That's drlesleyphillips.com, where you can ask questions or send her an email, and there's many free gifts on there for you as well. Come back again.